So welcome to my YouTube channel. That's what we call The Good Life. Today we're going to be concentrating on all the amazing things you can be sowing in September. Now, while we're being preoccupied with all the harvests, and at the moment I'm absolutely inundated with crops, it's really tempting not to sow anything. And while you don't have to sow anything, and it's perfectly okay not to sow anything in September, if you're keen like I am, I'm going to be sowing a few things, and I'm going to give you lots of options of what you can be sowing now. Now let's get started with the first thing that I'm going to be sowing myself. So let's get down and look at what I'm doing here. So the first thing I'm going to be sowing today is some Oriental salad. The reason I do the Oriental salad is they are very, very hardy. After the first few weeks, they normally come through really, really quickly, and you can be cropping, you know, as early as a month in. They're that quick to crop. And although they might ease off during the colder months, they'll then pick back up in the spring. So first of all, I'm going to sow them into little module trays, because that's the easiest way to do it. And once they've gone into module trays, I've then got two options. I can then either sow them under cover in my greenhouse, or I can put them out in my garden or my allotment. I'll probably do a mixture of both, just to kind of edge my bets. Normally this time of year I have way more room in my greenhouse, but because things came along a little bit slower, my greenhouse is still absolutely packed to the rafters with plants actually direct sown into my greenhouse, so I'm having to start everything off in module trays. So if you've got room in your greenhouse, you know, on the ground level, you can actually be sowing things straight into there. So these things that I'm showing you now, this time last year I was sowing these straight into the ground of my greenhouse, and I kept them in there. But unfortunately, because I haven't got any room, I'm going to have to start them off in module trays, which is fine. If I'm honest, it's a little bit more effort, but it is, you know, it is the way you have to do it when you haven't got enough room. So the things that I've got here, I've got a selection of things. Now I've got mixed spicy leaves here, but you can buy them separately. They consist of things like Mizuno, rocket, mibuna, mustard, pak choi. That sort of thing is kind of like the Oriental leaves. So these are what I'm going to be popping into the trays. I'm only going to put about 4 seeds in per module tray, so I'm not going to be putting in a lot. I'm just going to use my mixed pack today. In fact, I might make sure I've got some of the others. Actually, I'm going to do a few of the mixed ones and a few so I know which ones they are. So I've got mustard and pak choi there. So I'm going to pop those straight in. So I actually ran out of multi-purpose compost, but I had some blocks of core in the summer house, so I've just soaked that in some water. Normally I mix core with multi-purpose compost, but it's the end of the season, I've run out, and if I'm really honest, I'm too tight to go out and buy some more compost. But if I see some cheap, I may very well pick some up. So that is the mixed in there, like that. Pop what I've not used back in. Really, really important when you do trays like this, and you're putting multiple things in, that you mark them up, because you think you will remember, but honestly you never ever do. So if I just put mixed salad, then I will know what I've got in there. I will cover those in a moment. So I've got my Oriental ruby streaks, which are really lovely and quite spicy and very colourful. So in the winter, when things get a little bit dull, it's really lovely to have something quite colourful to add to your stir fries. That's the good thing about these kinds of mixed Oriental leaves. They're very, very multi-purpose. So you can use them for stir fries, stews, salads, all sorts of things. So that is one of the really great things about it. It gives you a lot of options of what you can do with what you've got. So there we go, there's a few. I say 4, but it might be 6 going in, so don't get too hung up about it. So I've got a few in there, like so. Pop them back in, probably not very well. And lastly, my pak choi. I love a bit of pak choi. You can, again, you can just eat this as small leaves, or you can let them get into bigger plants. It's really up to you, but pak choi is really, really lovely. And again, very, very versatile if you've never used it before. So there we go, that's those ones in. So like I said, very important that we label. So let's pop. So I'm now going to pop some curly kale in. So I don't normally start it off this time of year, but on the packet, or at least on one of the packets, it suggests I can do it in September. On mine over the allotment, they're still doing quite well, but they're starting to hit the top of the cover that I've got, and then it's really hard for me to protect them. And I know when I don't protect them, the birds or something else will get them. So I'm thinking it's wise to maybe start another batch off. As soon as I've got plenty of seeds, we might as well do that. So I've put the curly kale in. I'm next going to do the Nero di Toscano, which is basically more of a flat leaf variety. So both of which are really, really lovely, and it's just nice to have a good variety. One of the benefits of growing your own. Now, after putting these in, I've got a couple of options. I can either cover them with compost, which is perfectly okay to do, just a very, very light covering, or I can use vermiculite, which when I'm sowing like this, I actually prefer, but the choice is yours. If you haven't got any vermiculite, then obviously just cover it with a light dusting. Sometimes it's wise just to gently pat them down, not hugely, making sure you don't pick any of them up on your fingers, because you don't want to cross, and not that it really matters that much because they're all kind of quite wintry leaves. Just pat them down like so, just very, very gently. And I've got just like a little pot here, and I just gently cover them with the vermiculite. Like I say, you don't have to use vermiculite, just lets a little bit more light in, and is particularly good with small seeds like this. So I get a really big pot of it and I decant it into a container like this, and it lasts absolutely ages, so it is definitely worth getting some. So we're going to be moving on to some other things now, of things that you can be sowing. Like I say, once these have germinated, which they will probably germinate very quickly. When I did this time last year, they germinated really, really quickly. Within a few days, in fact, I was really shocked how quickly they germinated. So you've got two options. You can either water it with a rose over the top, which I personally wouldn't recommend, but I prefer to water from the bottom and let it soak up. So I might just have to lift it and water it that way, because if I move it too much, I'm going to knock everything off. So you just water it from underneath with seeds like this, and what will happen is the water will soak up through the little holes in the bottom, like so. If there's too much water, I can always just pour a little bit off, but you'll often be amazed how much it absorbs. So you know when it's soaked it all up. That's the other good thing with vermiculite, because the top of it, the colour will change. So that's those sown. Let's move on to a few other things you can be doing. Now, sorrel is a really lovely, a lemony sharp kind of leaf to eat. A very simple thing to start off. Again, you could start that off in module trays. Very, very hardy. So again, once started off, you can either keep it indoors or you can put it outside. The choice is completely yours. One of my very, very favourites is Bright Lights chard. I think everyone who follows me knows that I love a bit of chard. Again, a bit like the spicy oriental leaves, so incredibly versatile. You can either direct sow those or you can start off in module trays. Again, the choice is yours. Very, very hardy and very, very versatile. So a really, really great thing. So you can use the same method that we're doing here, or you can use the method that I'm going to do with some of these other seeds a little bit later. Another good one is Wild Rocket. Both chard and Wild Rocket, I don't need to start off any myself because I've already got some. But again, same method as this. Either start it off in trays or pop it straight into the ground. I think generally I start this off in module trays as a general rule of thumb. But once you've got Wild Rocket, it seeds and it keeps growing year after year. Something else is just kind of like last knockings for September is really cauliflower. You can plant this one all year round, but your spring cabbage, if you wanted to plant some spring cabbage, you really need to be getting it in this month. Again, in little module trays. Then once they've grown on, you then plant them outside into the ground. It's wise to have a little bit of cover because of the birds and things like that, and if it was particularly harsh. Beetroot, it is very late to be planting this, but you could plant some of this under cover, and you might get some small golf ball sized beetroots, but only if you're really, really keen. It's a little bit of a risk this time of year. I've already got plenty in, so I won't be putting any more in, but you could give beetroot a go, but you're not going to get those big massive tennis ball sized ones. They're going to be smaller golf ball sized ones. So something else I'm not starting off this month, but if you wanted to start it off in September, is your overwintering broad beans. That's another really great thing you can do. Again, you can sow them direct into the ground, or you can sow them into module trays. I'll probably be starting mine off next year in module trays, and you can watch me doing that if you want to do that and do it with me at the same time. And spring onions, another great one to be starting off. I generally start these off in little trays or a little pot, only because I find that they get really badly nibbled when I sow them direct into the ground. So another great thing you can be starting off. And again, spring onions, incredibly versatile things. I've already got some that I've started off, which I still need to plant out, which hopefully I'll be doing really, really soon. And let's move on to some things that I'm going to be direct sowing into the ground now. So let's move over to my patch. So we're now over by one of my raised beds, and we're going to move on to some things that I'm sowing direct into the ground. But before I do that, if you think you're getting value from watching my videos and you enjoy and want to see more of what I do, you can do something called Buy Me a Coffee. We're going to put a link up on the screen and one also in the description. Don't feel that you've got to. If all you can do is subscribe, comment and like, I would still be more than grateful. But Buy Me a Coffee is something that would help me keep running this channel. So let's move on to a few things that you can be planting now. And before I start putting these into the ground, you can actually be planting some potatoes for Christmas. Now, if you decide to do that, then I wouldn't plant them direct into the ground. I would plant them into pots or bags that you can either move into your greenhouse or into a porch or into a summer house or somewhere that's a little bit sheltered if it gets a little bit too cold. And do make sure you source yourself some Christmas potatoes. I know you can just pop ones in from the supermarket, but there's some particularly good ones like Charlotte, Nicola and Pentland Javelin. But if you go into a garden centre, you'll see some that'll have labelled on there Christmas potatoes, and you know that they're more likely to grow really well. So let's move on and start getting some bits in the ground without further ado. So although peas won't grow into peas, pea shoots are absolutely delicious. So I'm going to be popping some of those direct into the ground. So let's do a little channel. You can soak your peas overnight to give them a little bit of a head start. I've got to be really honest with you, I wasn't that organised today, so they're just going to go straight in. But something I do when I'm sowing things into the ground, and anyone who watches me probably will know this before I even start doing it, is I water the ground first, so the seeds are already going onto something moist. I mean, obviously if it's been really, really wet, you don't need to do it, but I'm just going to water it so that when I drop my peas in, they get a really good head start, so they're not just going onto very dry ground. Obviously I've dug this over, I've raked it. It's not perfect, but it's definitely better than it was. This little area here did have my mini sweet corns, which I had an absolutely amazing harvest, of which I've ate lots and lots, and they're in the freezer as well, so I couldn't eat them in one go. So I'm just going to pop these across here, and then I'll just cover them with some soil. So again, these are never going to grow into peas, or at least I'd be very surprised if they did, but they are absolutely delicious as pea shoots. Your peas are actually quite hardy even if you get a little bit of frost, but as you can see, it's quite a warm day here in Kent, so we've still got lots and lots of warm days. We always just think it's going to get really cold, but quite often it can stay quite warm right through to October and November. So that's those ones in. I will cover those up in a minute. And again, the same thing. I probably don't do my rows a little bit too close, but we're not trying to create big plants here. All these items here are all going to be miniatures and smalls. We're not trying to create massive, massive plants. Turnips is another one. So, and we're hoping with turnips and the radish that I'm going to be putting here, we're less chance to get flea beetle later in the year. We'll see, shall we? So if you remember to subscribe, you can see how these are getting on, or whether they don't get on at all. Same thing as before, I'm going to pop a little bit of water in the little channel there, like that, really, really easy. And it just means that they land on something moist, and hopefully they'll germinate quickly. If you've never sown anything this time of year, and you decide to sow something this time of year, what you'll quite often notice is that things do germinate that little bit quicker, because the ground is already lovely and warm. So You know, I'm not putting loads in, I'm just putting a few in. It's just a little bit of an added crop. I mean, obviously, if you're like me, not great at getting them back into the packets, do it over the right row. So at least if you spill some, you spill them in the right place. So I've got all my seeds in there. I've got some peas, I've got some radish, I've got some turnips, and I've got some salad. There are various types of salad you can be planting as well. So I've put them all in. I've just gently trailed over them so they're gently covered with a little bit of compost, and then I just water them with a rose. Very important you water them with a rose so the seeds don't get displaced. Now, if you've enjoyed this video and you're tempted to get some Christmas potatoes planted, I haven't yet, and I keep saying I'm not going to, but I am getting really tempted. If you are wanting to do that, then please watch the video that's up on the screen and in the description.